This video will tell you everything you need to know about cotton slime. I posted a viral short about this recently and there were lots of mixed opinions. Despite the recipe being very simple, many people still had problems getting it to work. So I hope this video will clear up all those issues, and be sure to watch until the end to see what a fully activated cotton slime looks like. First and foremost, is this actually a slime? The quick answer is no. Real slime is created through a chemical reaction between PVA and borate under alkaline pH conditions, so obviously none of that applies here. However, cotton slime behaves in a very similar way, so I feel it's acceptable to call this a slime with quotation marks. It's also incredibly cheap and easy to make, so based on those factors, I feel this has earned a place amongst other slime recipes. The main ingredient is polyester stuffing, which you can find inside cushions, stuffed toys, or bought as crafting material. This leads to the most controversial part of making cotton slime, which is whether or not to use existing stuffing. In most viral clips, people take apart plushies to use the stuffing inside. If you think about it, this is by far the cheapest and most convenient option. Almost everyone has a few plushies sitting around that you're not really that attached to. Instead of throwing them away or letting them collect dust, making cotton slime gives the toy a second lease of life. I have this capybara, which for some reason comes with a zip on the back, making it incredibly easy to remove the stuffing. I also noticed that many plushies tend to be really overstuffed, so you can easily take out a few handfuls without affecting the shape at all. I'm just pushing the remaining stuffing around and it looks perfectly fine again. And obviously, you can always restuff the plushie and close up the opening with a ladder stitch, so nothing gets permanently damaged. Let's begin with the most basic recipe. Place a handful of stuffing in a bowl and add a tiny bit of water. This should literally be no more than 1 or 2 tablespoons. Then add some coloring if you want, followed by a few pumps of soap or shampoo. Now start mixing until you have a fluffy ball. The most common mistake most people make is adding way too much water and soap. This will quickly turn everything into a foamy mess. You want to have just enough soap to hold the stuffing together. This part works exactly like these soap dispensers. You can see it contains a very small amount of liquid, which gets turned into a large amount of foam. There's a mesh fabric inside the pump, which creates the bubbles and helps it foam up. The structure of polyester stuffing is exactly like the mesh, which amplifies the bubbles when you put pressure on it. The other important step is to knead the mixture very well. You can also do this in a sink, but make sure to close the plug beforehand. This entire DIY is basically a form of wet felting. This is when you use soap and water to break down the fibers and create a smoother shape. If made correctly, the slime shouldn't leave a lot of residue behind. I usually aim for this texture, which looks a bit like cotton candy. Considering it's just soap and water, it's basically cleaning your hands as you play with it. One thing worth mentioning is that you have to be quite careful when adding color. Because the main ingredient is soap, the pigment is actually getting washed out of the foam and is going to deposit itself on your skin. I tried food coloring and acrylic paint and always ended up with a lot of stains on my hands. So it's best to stick with very pastel shades or just keep it white. Once you're done with cotton slime, the best option is to leave it somewhere to dry up. This is a batch that's about 3 days old, and you can see it has basically turned back into stuffing. Cotton slime is reusable, so you can remake it over and over again using the same material. Just add some soap and water and mix it very well. I realized you can even make snowballs with this, and it's safe and fun to use. I wouldn't throw it out unless it gets really dirty, such as from being on the ground or being stepped on. When disposing of cotton slime, the most important thing is not to put anything down the sink. This is a guideline that applies to every type of slime. Slime should always be allowed to dry out and thrown into the trash. So now comes the biggest plot twist of this DIY. I bought a bag of cotton wool because I thought it would create a slightly different texture. To my massive surprise, using cotton for cotton slime doesn't work at all. The fibers simply clump together and they don't have the sponginess compared to polyester. This means you can't produce the foam by rubbing it together. I suspect that a large number of people who said their DIYs failed were trying to do this with cotton pads or cotton wool. Mine feels like a clump of wet tissue paper and it's not satisfying at all. I think I've seen clips of people successfully using some kind of cotton for this, but it's definitely a lot harder to make than polyester. Now for the final experiment, which is what happens if you try to activate this like a real slime. I made a typical batch of cotton slime here and you can see it simply pulls apart. Real slime is elastic, so it needs to bounce back or at least hold its shape without ripping. To start activating this, I need to add PVA, which is a water-soluble polymer. I'm squeezing in a few tubes of this clear PVA glue. Then I'm adding a big pinch of baking soda. Now I'm going to mix it with gloves on because this part is going to get pretty sticky. It's quite fun though because it feels almost like a normal cotton slime. Now I'm going to add the contact lens liquid, which contains borate. This will activate the glue and we'll see what happens. At first this feels like a slightly stickier version of cotton slime and it forms a ball more easily. However, the glue seems to be causing everything to clump together, which makes the texture less fluffy. The ASMR is still pretty amazing though. This is starting to feel like a very overactivated slime. Unlike the cotton wool version, at least this one holds its shape, but it's not very soft or elastic. I managed to create some really satisfying ASMR, but it eventually becomes too hard to play with. So the best cotton slime recipe is simply polyester stuffing, water, and soap. The type of soap really doesn't make a difference, so you can use shampoo, shower gel, or dishwashing liquid. If the surface starts to dry out, just add a tiny bit of water and mix it until it foams up again. I hope this video was helpful and best of luck making cotton slime. I'm Joanna, thank you for watching and I'll see you soon. Bye!